All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful spring afternoon. Welcome to the 12th Virtual History of 2021, presented by Baltimore Architecture Foundation and Baltimore Heritage. This is Nathan Denny's. I am the Associate Director of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. First, thank you to everyone who donated to be with us today. Your support allows us to host these virtual histories every week, and we really appreciate your support. I think we're now on almost 40 virtual histories since we started doing these last spring. So thank you for everyone who stuck with us. And before we get started, a few announcements. Next week, we are continuing our Trailblazer series with a presentation by Barbara Wilkes, the first woman to serve as president of AIA Baltimore. She will discuss the development of her early waterfront work in Baltimore's harbor and how that grew into her focus today, addressing places where city and nature come together and form new relationships, and how well-designed places can result in more sustainable relationships between ourselves and our communities and the planet. And the following week, Charlie Duff is returning with a talk about the development of downtown after the 1904 fire, with comparisons to the rebuilding of London after its Great Fire in 1666. And to introduce Kathleen, we have Jillian Storms, who is a past president of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation and a co-chair of the BAF State Architect Society. And she also led our project to document and research the early women of architecture in Maryland. With that, Jillian, please take it away.
Thank you. Yes, today it's my great honor to introduce Kathleen and to help share her story. She and I had gotten to know each other back when she invited me to help start the Women in Architecture Committee in 2012, and it's just been such a wonder to get to know her. She's actually the first and only African-American to serve as president of AIA Baltimore in 2012 and AIA Maryland in 2016. And for those who don't know what AIA stands for, it's the American Institute of Architects, our professional organization. She also helped to establish the first chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects in 2017. And both the Equity Committee, which is what the Women in Architecture Committee is now known as, and NOMA are co-hosting this event. Kathleen founded her firm, SP Arc Inc. in 2005 with her former partner, Mahendra Parekh, who retired in 2008. And her firm offers a broader range of planning, architectural design, and landscape architectural services. In 2011, Kathleen was awarded both top 100 minority business enterprises in the Mid-Atlantic region and outstanding alumni of the School of Architecture and Planning at Morgan State University. She has served as a guest lecturer at Morgan and as an adjunct professor teaching management, practice, and law. And if you have any questions, be sure to add them in the chat, and we'll get to many as we can at the end of the presentation. And with that, Kathleen, could you turn to our next slide? So I had wanted to make sure that when the 100th and 50th anniversary of AIA Maryland told their story, that we made sure we looked at diversity because its past history has not always been that. Right now, when it in 2019, fewer than 1 in 5 new architects identified as a person of color. Only 3% of architects were Black women. Actually, it's 0.3, and 3% that completed the registration exam in 2018 were Black. Now, this has changed. Through the good efforts of NOMA and other organizations, licensure has doubled for Black women in architecture. But I wanted to show here there was a study that AIA, National AIA did in 2016, and these are some of the graphs that are from that shows the perception of why both people of color or women have not have not been drawn to the field, or that why there may be underrepresentation. And a lot for the women has to do with the work-life balance and being able to have kind of more choices of how to work and when to work. For African Americans, it particularly is hard for affordability. And I know, Kathleen, you could speak to that.
Absolutely. I did not, my education was not through the traditional sense of going to high school, graduating, and then going on to college and going into professional life. So I do understand it. But despite all of that, our numbers are now above 500. I believe the last count I saw was 503. So we've come a long way in helping those who are interested in becoming architects and to getting licensure. And I credit that to the programs that NOMA has done, as well as Catherine Williams, who has been really a godsend in helping to get more women involved with her programs of Black women in architecture and so forth. So.
And with that in mind, the next slide shows a lot of the work that has been done to help identify the early trailblazers in the field. These are all the first for Black women in the profession. And we've broken it out by in the US, in Maryland. We are still trying to dig into, for our local chapter, some of these trailblazers. And it's, to me, it's always amazing how history gets lost so quickly if it's not been the perceived importance at the time. And so, but we're Kathleen and I are dedicated to get that figured out. Anyway, but if you have any ideas, or if anybody on this call actually had registration early or became an AIA member, please raise your hand. We'd love to know you. And with that, Kathleen, take it away.
Thank you, Jillian. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. So training is very important in architecture. And for me, my training started at Towson State University with an undergrad in geography and a concentration in urban planning. I looked at the big picture, that was my focus. And then I went on to Morgan State University to look at architecture and to study architecture in what I would call putting the building in the big picture of planning. My alma mater, Towson State, and up in the left-hand corner there is Jenkins Hall, which is the building that the School of Architecture, then the Institute, was located. And then with Dr. Richardson's foresight and the vision of Phil Freelon, we now have a beautiful center known as the CBIST, and it houses the schools of architecture as well as engineering and construction management. Design, assess, and restore are the guidelines under which we or I have operated, and we as my firm has operated since its founding. This is one of our early projects. It was the restoration of a pumping station. One of the things that we've focused on are buildings that have a commitment and community, meaning they provide some service for the community. This building provides clean drinking water. It treats stormwater. And so it was a forethought of Abel Wallman, who realized in order for a city to grow, it needed to have water. And that was what this building does and provides. And it was, at that time, a very important part of the city's aesthetic, and having utility buildings that had architectural value was extremely important during the time that this building was built, which was in 1912. You can also see the beautiful ironwork that was done and not actually available to the public by way up in the attic that supports the roof. And this is the finished and restored building that was some 5 years after we started the design started the construction process. And you can see the pumps. These are the new pumps that were installed in the building. And also is in this building, which is very unique, is a museum. The museum was housed in this building to help people understand what the processes are for creating clean drinking water. It was updated, but then later closed due to funding, but currently is back on the table to be reopened. Another historic building that was early in our, in forming our firm was Hampden Hall. Hampden Hall started life as a meeting place for Civil War veterans. It fell on hard times, and the building that you see in the middle of the screen was what we saw when we showed up. A lot of the plaster work and everything had fallen due to water damage, and the building was really struggling at that time, and the only parts of it that were inhabitable were the storefronts. Following restoration work that was done in 2005 and 6, and then it was reopened through the vision of Mr. Preller, who was both owner, contractor, and developer for this project. It has become a focal point on the avenue in Hampden and continues today to serve this community. And unfortunately, in this time of COVID, one of the things that have really become important is the ability to unfortunately bury those who have passed on, and to do it with dignity, even though we're not able to all participate. Joseph Brown Funeral Home had the foresight and of starting this process by creating a ceremonial plaza that allows people to experience the same type of ceremony that you would at a gravesite, but while taking advantage of a cremation process. Leadership. Without leadership, we have no next generation. And in order to support those who would come after us, we need to be available. And so that was one of the things that I really enjoyed doing. Being an alumnus of Morgan, going back and sharing what I had learned and practiced, to me was a very important calling and something I really enjoyed. So in my class, I invited multiple professionals so that the students would have exposure to the type of professions that they would be working with and in conjunction with consultants, attorneys, and all of that. So they would be prepared when they went out into the workplace. As president of AIA Baltimore, I was able to carry this even further and invite my fellow professionals to do the same thing. Adopt a school, reach out to underserved communities, and make it available to know what good design is and how it improves and betters all people, and that it should not be exclusive to the wealthy. As AIA president, AIA Maryland president, I had the pleasure of serving under Scott as president of 2015 and learning from him so that when I came in 2016, I was prepared and ready to go. I also had the distinct pleasure of meeting Ms. Crawford, who was the first woman president of AIA Maryland. In the lineup that you see here on the right hand at the top of the screen are past presidents in order of their service. Down below was at the inauguration of the AIA president, Bill Bates, who was a friend and who I was very proud to attend his inauguration. But in addition to him in this lineup of fellows is also Marshall Purnell. Marshall Purnell was the first African-American to serve that role as president of AIA National. One of the things while being president of AIA Baltimore that I also spearheaded and pushed to come to Baltimore was a Women in Architecture program. My idea was that we would develop a program that would help to strengthen women in the profession and support their efforts to get licensure, and also to have the Women's Summit to come to the Mid-Atlantic region. And so I attended the first Women's Summit in 2009, and I was just so just pleasantly pleased to find out there were so many women who were anxious to meet each other, to support each other, and create a strong women's leadership program. So with that said, in 2017, jointly with the Women in Architecture in Northern Virginia, DC, as well as in Delaware and in Pennsylvania, we created this program that was located in DC as a center point between all of the Mid-Atlantic states. And this is the opening reception to which my firm was one of the sponsors. Another thing that I'm very proud of, after having served as president, Maryland president, I finally was able to see a NOMA chapter come to Baltimore. This is something that I had talked up for years. I tried to find out if there'd ever been a NOMA chapter in Baltimore. There was just no information. And later I discovered they hadn't, that most NOMA members who lived in Baltimore were connected to the DC chapter. And I kept talking about it. And finally, some young people approached me and asked me if I would help them get the chapter started. I was humbled by this and too excited to even speak to, that I had been invited to help them get started, and that they were really interested in doing this. And so we were able to get our charter in 2017, and that happened in Texas. And this is a photograph of us receiving that charter. And I became the first president to serve the Baltimore chapter of NOMA, known as Be More NOMA. This is the 2019 convention, which was in Brooklyn, New York. And those are Morgan students who participated in the student design competition, which I was very proud of their efforts and of their project. They did a good job in displaying their project and also in the competition. Also, we also supported young girls in learning about the built environment, including architecture and construction, as well as engineering. And so this is the NAWIC Girls Summer Camp, to which we participated and took over one day of their session and introduced these young girls, in excess of 20 young girls, to architecture. And as you can see, they really got into it. They really enjoyed it. We created models. We talked about why people and how people design, and then help them to visualize this in a real 3D concept of having a model. Service to community has also been a part of both my practice as well as my own personal life. In practice, we have given countless hours of service to different community initiatives. One of those initiatives is the St. Bernardine's Roman Catholic Church. The pastor of that church to which I attend approached me and asked me if we could come up with some ideas as to how we could improve the entrance to the church, which is on a very busy street, very highly traveled street of Edmondson Avenue. He was a new pastor, and the previous pastor, who was very much beloved, had passed away in 2015. But we wanted to convince the community that St. Bernardine's was still here to stay and still here to serve the community. So we came up with a design that brought the steps down to the sidewalk in a more inviting way, made it feel more safe with the introduction of handrails and so forth. And then also brought a small garden space that would run along the property line along the sidewalk, and opened it up, creating a ramp on one side that would allow people to at least get up to the plaza area without the use of steps. This area of Baltimore, Upton, was actually the start of my family coming to Baltimore. My grandparents settled in Baltimore in the Upton area, escaping the depression that they were experiencing in the South in Virginia. And they actually lived in a house 1 block off of Pennsylvania Avenue. That was a strategic location because at that time, Pennsylvania Avenue was the place to be. The Royal Theater, which was one of several theaters on the Chitlin circuit that was very well known, actually even still known today throughout the world, saw entertainers like Cab Calloway, Billie Holiday, James Brown, just to name a few. And also had movies of the day were shown here as well as the nighttime entertainment. Pennsylvania Avenue at that time was lined with theaters, and it was known as the theater district for Baltimore City. And you can see the Regent Theater in the bottom of the screen. And this is a map of that area. So, and what the colored map also shows is the revitalization project that is being planned now for that area. So this is looking at Pennsylvania Avenue towards downtown, and the proposed arts and entertainment district, which has now become the Maryland Arts, the only Maryland Black Arts and Entertainment District in Baltimore. We're showing the project here that we're hoping to bring to fruition to help reinvigorate that theater involvement on Pennsylvania Avenue. In addition to the theater, we're also wanting to create, which is very popular in that area, a place for the football team that has been there in that community for many years, and has provided a safe place for young people to play football, play sports, tennis, basketball as well. So we're looking at expanding that, moving it off of Pennsylvania Avenue, putting it deeper into the community, and improving the facilities for the children to have a safe place to play. That includes the sports complex, which would house locker rooms, as well as a boxing program, which is currently in the area, but we would move that program into this new building. And then finally, the Royal Theater complex. It would include a theater for performances as well as video, and then also house adjacent to it a restaurant, as well as other retail businesses along Pennsylvania Avenue. So This is a list of places if you want to learn more about some of the groups that I've talked about, such as NOMA, as well as AIA, and learn more about women and diversity in architecture and in Baltimore specifically. So I'll take any questions if anyone has any in the chat.
Yeah, be sure to put your questions in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of compliments and such from people, but I don't see a direct question yet, but I can read you some of what people have shared. Deborah Stargell said she's so proud of you. And Walter Street said, so many friends and colleagues in your presentation, hope you'll gather this year. So let's see if anything new came in. Okay, well, no, not yet. So we got to think quick on our feet. I remember when I was working on this whole presentation with you, we had to figure out how to narrow down what you wanted to focus on. But you had mentioned other projects like in Reservoir Hill and such, and for the shortness of time, we didn't go into that. But are there any other areas of the city that you feel particularly proud that you would love to see more investment in?
Well, Wastewater Hill is one of those places. We're currently working on the tanks. If anyone has been down Druid Park Lake Drive, you can see all the construction has been going on now for several years. And there still are a few years left in that construction process. That is a part of the clean water effort. And we're tanking the drinking water that used to be provided by the reservoir is now going to be protected in tanks. And then we need to restore the historic park once that is done. So we're hoping that this spearheads some new investment in that community as well, especially on the lakeside. And seeing some growth in that community as well.
We did get a question from Jane Willabors, from Jane. I'm not going to try to do, sorry, I'm very bad with names. Has planning with the Uptown Main Street and the CDC stalled during the pandemic? Is there a timeline for work on the Upton project?
Well, let me say this. First off, this project, as most of you know, when you're trying to get a project like this off the ground, it takes many years to do so. And I actually started this project with Jim Hamlin, who has been the godfather, the father, and all of that for this project back, in 2000, I guess in earnest, I got started somewhere around 2008, but I knew about the project since 2005. And so we had gotten to this point where we're getting some funding for the project to begin to take it to the next level, having been awarded through the efforts of Miss Breon, the Arts and Entertainment District, through all the hard work that she's done to make that happen. It is in process, but it has slowed. And for obvious reasons during the pandemic. However, we are connecting with the new mayor and the new city council to keep it going.
And Gloria had asked, how did it make you feel to be working on Uptown area since your grandparents started there?
It felt like going back home. We used to, even once my parents had moved away from the community, that was my grandmother's church was in the heart of the community, Pennsylvania Avenue, AME Zion. And we would attend church with her regularly and visit all her friends and our friends who still remained in the community. That was a weekly thing on Sunday afternoon. So, as of late, a lot of, the old community members have passed away. The people who were there when I was a kid had passed away, but it was really nice to come back and see all the work and to participate. We have several projects on Pennsylvania Avenue, which include the Avenue Bakery. And that is a brainchild also of Jim Hamlin, as well as there's a restaurant down the street, and now I'm not going to remember the name of it, but that we helped to expand down in the 1500 block of Pennsylvania Avenue. So I would encourage you to also help support those businesses, especially now, because they, again, can't fully open due to COVID and the sizes of their buildings, but they are taking orders and they are doing carry out. So I would suggest people patronize them.
So we have a couple more questions that come in, and probably that's all we'll be able to take. We're heading after the 1:30 hour. But one of the questions was, can you speak about the Lexington Market project?
I'm really not involved in that project, unfortunately. So I don't have a lot of information on that one.
That's okay. Another one is, what does the design process look like when you have a project? For example, how did you decide to make the specific renovations that you made to St. Bernardine's Church?
So one of the things about St. Bernardine's Church and its location on a very steep hill, it is actually the intersection of two very steep hills, and it's at the bottom of those two hills. And trying to figure out a way to make the entrance to the church feel less, I don't know, scary almost. It was the way it was laid out originally, was to divide it up into three sections by reducing the width of the stair and creating this main entrance off of Edmondson Avenue, and then creating a secondary stair off of Mount Holly, which is actually where most of the parishioners come in the church. They enter off of the Mount Holly side because that's where parking is, in the parking lot in the back. And then the accessible entrance, which at least gets you up onto the platform level and connects to the educational building, as well as to the parsonage building, which is directly next door. It just made sense. I just looked at the paths that everyone traveled when they came to church, and how they had to walk all the way around, to get to the front door. This just kind of cut off that walk and made it an easier walk. It gave them a more pleasant walk because they were now walking past these flower gardens to enter into the church, giving them, a sense of, calm and so forth as they make this walk in, versus, they're walking around the building and trying to hold on to the steps, which were, on this very steep slope, and at many times uneven in their heights. It was a pretty easy. I looked at the party, I laid out the plan, and that was the thing that just really stood out to me. That this is the way that people come to church. So
I have two remaining questions, which I will ask. Can you tell us about any of the challenges you face in your career as a woman and as an African American, and how were you able to overcome them with so much grace? That was from Cindy.
Okay. Two of the challenges. Okay, so well, let me say this. I have to say, for the most part, in my career, I have strategically tried to make good choices in where I worked. And for the most part, the firms that stand out in my mind, which is Beck Powell & Parsons, WBCM, and most notably, Leon Bridges' firm, TLBC, it was a welcoming place. However, I was the only woman and the only African American in most of those firms in the architecture department. And while I would not say that I felt any sense of adversity to that, I did see that women weren't really being promoted within the firm, especially the larger firms, and to ownership. And my resolve was that I needed to prove that women can be leaders. And in order to do that, I need to do that myself. I need to take that step off of being in a secure position and in a secure job and take that risk, because if I can't show others, if you can't see it, you can't be it. That's the thing that I've lived by. And so therefore I need to be able to be that demonstration to other people and not just talk it, but walk it. And so that's how I ended up here.
I gotta remember these snappy takes. Whenever I'm starting to feel a little down, I'm gonna see. This is good. Okay, we have one more question, which I'm gonna fold in with another question. There was a question about how's your firm surviving the pandemic, but more, there was several questions about where do you see your firm going in another 5 to 10 years?
Surviving the pandemic was scary in the beginning, because if you guys remember, everybody was shut down for that first week. Engineers, architects, everyone except construction. And as a member of the legislative committee for the state of Maryland, AIA Maryland, we got together and said, hey, this isn't going to work. How do contractors move forward without input from architects and engineers? We reached out to the governor's office, and they immediately saw the light and reopened engineers and architects' offices. So now everybody's scrambling to figure out, how do we do this? Because if you know anything about how engineers and architects' offices function, they're usually one big room, and everybody's in this one big room together, and sometimes working very closely with one another. So, we have given the building that we're in, by the way, an old historic building built in 1931, and we've been restoring piece by piece as we go. We closed down, worked at home for a while. A lot of our work went on the shelf for a little while, and then all of a sudden it all came back at once, which is always a little scary. We've been managing to stay above and get it all done. And then we reopened our offices, and for the most part, we're here, and we socially distance and all. And so we've been able to make it work. What was the second part of your, going forward 5 years? Oh, geez, that's a good question. I'm really hoping to begin to look at transitioning my firm. And so in 5 years, I'm looking at that being a point at which I'm, training that next group who would come in and want to take over and run it if there's.
Oh, sorry. Did you say something? Someone just popped up an email to me, and that said I was muted. So are you? Uh-oh, I lost you.
Oh, I'm muted. I was muted.
Okay, there you go.
So yes, so encouraging the next, next leader and having a firm, and also looking to grow my firm as well, to get a little larger than where we are now. Once we get on the other side of this, yeah, absolutely.
That's just wonderful. I can't believe you're thinking of retiring. I see you as so young and fresh. That's the thing. I see you continuing a long way out.
I'm not really going anywhere. I just want to have a little bit more time on the beach.
Yeah, that would be good. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I've posted a bunch of the links in the chat if you've had a chance to look or click on them. This presentation will be put on the YouTube site for AIA BAF by next week, and you can share it with others if you think it's something that they can get inspired by, especially the young people in this profession. And we'll be sure to share the chat with Kathleen afterwards, so she can have a copy of all your wonderful, lovely comments.
That's it for me. Thank you so much, Jillian. And thanks so much for inviting me and seeing me as a trailblazing woman in architecture. It's been my whole life. I decided at 12 years old I wanted to be an architect, And I've been working to that end, and hopefully people think I do a good job for them.
And like I was telling her this morning, you know, to me, she's been larger than life for me. So I never perceived that there had been this lack of people in the profession. But when we started scratching our head trying to figure out the generation before, we were having a hard time coming up with that. And I realized that this is trailblazing. Yeah, she's still living because it is that soon since this has been possible.
Absolutely, great. Absolutely. And I
we're
really
looking
appreciate
for other people that inspired.
Yeah, I really appreciate you putting this out there. I hopefully it is inspiring other young people to join the profession and see the importance in doing so. So yes, thank you.
Great, thank you both.
Thank you, Nathan.
And I hope everyone can tune in next week for Barbara Walks.
Yeah.